Hi everyone, thank you for joining today. My name is Avani Sapra and I am a junior consultant at Turner and Townsend. We're joined today by Claire Brown, also from Turner and Townsend. This is a retrofit information support and expertise event, which is fully funded by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero and delivered by Turner and Townsend. Thank you again for joining, and I'll now hand over to Claire.
Thank you so much, Ivani, and welcome everyone to this RISE Accessible Resident Engagement session. So if this is your first time or it's your 10th time to one of our masterclasses, we always like to kind of set the scene in terms of what are we talking about, and then kind of pull some more of the details. And as always, we really like to have a look at some case studies. So we've got a couple of examples today, and then we will direct you to some of the other resources that might be really useful for you and some of your colleagues or your project team to have a look at and to really help you on your retrofit journey. So again, thank you for joining us today. And so yeah, welcome to everyone. Always a pleasure. So starting off with, I really want to kind of draw down what we mean by accessible housing. So this is a task for you straight away, launching in. Have a think about, for you, what it means you personally, what it means you professionally. You might be very new to role. You might have been in your role for 25 years or even longer. You might be someone who is kind of new to something. You might be someone who, has recently joined. You might be part of a merger. What do you think when you kind of hear the term accessible housing? What kind of images does it conjure up in your mind? So please do use the chat function. You can pop your comments in there. You won't be marked on these. It is very much about kind of your initial kind of thoughts on that. So so we've got a comment there about affordability. Yeah, absolutely. That can be linked into if you can access housing itself and housing that is also suitable for you and for your needs. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Yeah, we've got the idea of modification here. We are all individuals on this call here today. We're all individuals. We aren't kind of carbon copies of each other. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. We all have things that help us live our lives slightly easier. It might be that you use transcription services. It might be that you need to use a mobility aid in terms of walking. And we can absolutely apply this to our homes. So that availability keeps coming up. So a really interesting angle there. And think about it in terms of retrofit. What does that mean in terms of accessibility for retrofit? So thank you ever so much for those of you who put something in the chat. Feel free to keep kind of pulling those in and kind of having those comments, but also those connections with different people who are all interested in this topic and have all come along today. One of the key things that we note, so if we take the UK as a whole, not just England, we know that people are living longer lives and the proportion of older people in the population is increasing. The UK has this ageing population and therefore the provision of appropriate housing for all people with or without disabilities, including specialist and supported housing, is going to be really crucial in helping everyone live a safe and I really like this bit, independent lives. If we look at some of the data, this is kind of really key sometimes, particularly when you are thinking about your case, your organisation. You might have one property, you might have 10,000. There might be different things in between. Think about how this is going to implicate your organisation. So in the mid-2016s, there were 1.6 million people aged 85 and over. By mid-2041, so that's 16 years forward, it's projected to double to 3.2 million. So by offering older people a better choice of accommodation to suit their changing needs, we can absolutely help them live independently for longer, therefore feel more connected to their communities, help reduce costs to social care and health systems. When we look at this a little bit more, we can see that unsuitable or unadapted housing can have a negative impact, particularly on disabled people and their carers, who might also have some sort of disability, but also might be not able to kind of care for that person in the kind of key way. If we look at government statistics, we find that 365,000 disabled people in England have what is known as an unmet housing need. And that is taken from Inside Housing. It was a document published last year. So we have this challenge. If we are doing retrofit, we want to be thinking about this as one of the challenges to be considering when we're thinking about our risks, when we're thinking about the projects that we want to be doing, building it into that strategy of the retrofit that we want to be doing. So when we look at some of the definitions, it's really important to make sure we understand what we mean here. So accessibility in this context is really thinking about the design of a product, a device, or a service to be usable by people with or without disabilities. And it's about the quality, to be able to reach that level of quality for everyone to be able to enjoy their home. When we think about resident engagement, what we are thinking about is that proactive effort for property managers, landlords, asset managers, community teams to interact and involve residents in various aspects of that community life, and the retrofit process that is going to be applied to that home, to the estate, to the whole portfolio. So what we're thinking about, if we combine both of those, is that accessible resident engagement is ensuring that proactive efforts made by whoever's managing that project to involve residents in that community life, to make sure that it is understood by everyone, particularly thinking about the context of disabilities and or vulnerabilities. Now, your organisation might assess those in a particular way. And what I would always say for a retrofit strategy and a retrofit project is to make sure that you are aligning with your organisational themes. When we think about it in terms of what this might actually look like, these are just 3 examples. You might have some really nice examples that you have in terms of the work that you've already done. So it's thinking about how can we kind of make sure that the space is usable. So the top left is all about making sure that it is a wheelchair width, that people can actually move around their property in an easy way that means that they are safe and secure in their home. On the right, this is absolutely about access to that house in particular. So if you have limited mobility, if you have some sort of illness perhaps, or you have a known disability that means that actually stairs become very problematic for you, it's then thinking, okay, well, how can we kind of implement this? And in this example on the top right, we've got a ramp going up to that property. It has meant that that person can be able to stay in their home and utilize it and access it. So there's no disruption in terms of having to move. There will, of course, be disruption in terms of the build of the ramp, but for the getting the benefit and being able to still remain in that home, it has meant that that is possible. We also have little details that might kind of be added. So whilst the bottom picture is a bathroom, and that might not be part of the big retrofit project, it might be part of the asset management. It might be part of bathroom renewals. It might be around particular adaptations for a new tenant that has moved in. And thinking about, okay, well, actually, what do we need? And it's that ability to kind of be able to use that home. So using a bathroom, absolutely, people need to utilise that. And making sure that we're putting in those suitable adaptations that are going to mean that person stays in their home. When we think about this as well, I always like to go back to, are there regulations? Is there legislation? Where is this kind of information coming from? To make sure that we are being compliant in our work that we do. So we've pulled out 2 examples. In your organisation, you might have all other conditions. If you are perhaps in a charitable trust, there might also be additional elements that you need to consider there. Likewise, if you're in a local council, there might also be additional elements to reach out to. So these are just 2 examples that fit in really nicely for what we're talking about today. The first one I wanted to touch on is the Equality Act. So this was around legislation in the UK, not just in England, that legally protects people from discrimination in the workplace and this is the important bit, wider society. This act covers 9 protected characteristics, including age and disability. The public sector body's accessibility regulations require public sector websites, mobile apps to be more accessible by making them perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. They also require the publication of an accessibility statement that explains the accessibility of the service or the mobile app. Why we put this in here is sometimes with retrofit projects, particularly we see it around heating, but it can be other elements too, is that apps might be part of that upgrade, and therefore making sure people have accessibility to that it is appropriate and it is robust and it is understandable is going to be really key in that. The public sector accessibility regulations is also making sure that when we are thinking about resident engagement, we're thinking about how that digital approach can be really useful, but also we need to think of it in terms of, can the person in that property digitally connect? And therefore, what adaptations or what other options might we need to think about in case they aren't digitally connected, or that they struggle, particularly around a designated disability. So really think about it, and knowing your tenants, knowing your residents, knowing your communities about how this is going to really fit into your resident engagement strategy. So we're thinking about our key considerations. And again, it's a really nice mix of people on the call today from different organisations. The key considerations, we have broad kind of themes, and then you'll have some specifics that really apply to your organisation. So when we think about it, we will have completely a whole range of different people who live in our premises that we look after. If we think about it in terms of older people, again, we can go and have a look at what some of the different regulations, guidelines, and frameworks use to frame this particular element. So if we have a look at the National Planning Policy Framework, probably known as the NPPF, it uses this definition. So it talks about people over or approaching retirement age, including the active, newly retired, through to what they call the very frail elderly. When we're looking at housing, it's talking about housing needs that need to encompass that accessible, adaptable, but also general needs, and thinking about it in terms of a full range of different specialist, non-specialist, retirement, different care needs. So it's all encompassing here to think about it in the context of housing. When we look about it in terms of disability, we can go back to the Equality Act from 2010. And the definition we find here is a person is disabled if they have a physical or mental impairment which has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on their ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. It lists some here, but again, it is not a standalone list. There will be many, many different elements that can be pulled in to really think that someone actually is going to recognise themselves as having a disability, but also having a disability under this act. So this can include kind of blindness, learning difficulties, autism is included there, which may generate a range of housing requirements, which can also change over time. So really thinking about it in terms of the person in that property, thinking about what it is, and it might be multiple issues, thinking about it in terms of a retrofit project, how is that going to change, but also how over a long period of time, how their disability might also change and evolve. And therefore that consideration is really important too. We're also including younger people here as well. So if you have a look at the Education Act, there are lots of other acts we could have kind of pulled this out of. But in terms of thinking about it for young people, a young person is defined as someone over compulsory school age, but under 18. So within the properties, you might have multi-generation. You might have older people, working age, younger people, and also children. So young people will have to be considered uniquely to other residents. Approaches absolutely, as with everyone else, should be tailored to align to those younger person's views, and the benefits of retrofitting to be understood. We might see that this might lead to more online elements, but again, thinking back to kind of digital connectivity, it might be thinking specifically for that young person, how it is going to be impacting them in terms of a retrofit. So pulling all of this together, a lack of availability across all tenures is seen. We know that from the data. We know that this means that they are an absolutely high demand. We also know that expectations aren't being met. And this is about making sure when we're thinking of our resident engagement, how are we going to realign those expectations, manage those expectations, and really talk through different options? Engagement can be picked up by multiple agents within a particular team, and so collaboration is going to be really important. Depending on the size of your organisation and your plan for your retrofit, this will mean multiple different people. It might mean different teams. It might mean just a really kind of bespoke amount of people. So really have a think about how that collaborative piece is going to be really, really beneficial here. And the last point I wanted to just put on here was, if we were doing a kitchen refurbishment, if you had someone who has a known disability, so say, for example, they were in a wheelchair and you were redoing their kitchen and you knew that that person was in a wheelchair, you would really think about the heights of the cupboard in that area. You would think about, okay, well, can that person reach that cupboard if we put it up high, if they can't really stand unaided for a period of time? So retrofit is absolutely no different to this. If we are thinking about heating controls, for example, we're not necessarily going to put it up really high if that person isn't ever going to be able to reach that heating control panel. So really think about it in terms of, what do we already do in terms of kitchen and bathroom replacement? And that's a really nice area to explore, because it's something that we're already doing, particularly in registered providers. It might be something that you are really used to doing anyway. So have a think about, everything we're thinking about doing for our retrofit. How is that person in that property who has particular needs of whatever variety, how are we going to help and support that person with their retrofit journey? So things like window openings, where are those? Taking in mind kind of noise and security as well. So when we're thinking about it in terms of that actual piece of engagement, as I've said, every occupant, every resident, every tenant will have unique needs. It will be really crucial in terms of making sure that your retrofit resident engagement piece really considers that accessibility to you. It's really thinking about what tools are available to us, what resources are going to be needed. I'm thinking about, do we need something extra to make sure we are managing the process? Or do we have that capability within our core group or within our kind of wider collaborative group for whatever our retrofit project might be? We do have an example here, and there are lots of other different tools available. This is one from a kind of housing for older people. The shop insight really helps people have a think about what the demand element is, particularly for larger portfolios. So if that is something that is specific to you, this can be a really nice opportunity to explore. There are different ones to really think about, and different ones that you might be able to kind of share with colleagues at the end of this session. Resident engagement is absolutely one of the greatest risks to successful delivery. So really kind of understanding what is going on with the tenants, with the residents, is going to be really vital. And so understanding how you can manage this and how you can process it should absolutely be part of that retrofit strategy. So this is taken from the building safety campaign. So over the last couple of years, we've seen that, particularly for high-rise buildings, but also any building, thinking about kind of building safety is really important. And so this is really looking at how our understanding of people is going to be really important. Thinking about who lives in each home. It's not just a house, it's a home. Someone has created that space as a safe haven from the rest of the world. So thinking about engaging via multiple channels, providing listening opportunities. Now, this might be extending a service already that exists in a kind of telephony service that you have. It might be around directly communicating with people. Really thinking about how inclusivity is going to be a really golden thread that needs to go through this, and thinking about who is going to need to be involved in this. You might already have fabulous tenant engagement teams. You might have tenant champions who sit on your board. You might have localized community groups that actually you already engage with, that you work with. Really thinking about that kind of really big picture of who is going to need to be involved and what channels of communication can you possibly use. We've seen examples where over winter there have been kind of warm hubs set up by registered providers that have also been an opportunity to communicate with residents. So inviting them in to come in for a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, something warm, having a nice safe space to be able to kind of then engage with services, opportunities, different discussions to be had. And so really thinking about how that can be part of the process. Some of the other details over the next couple of slides we'll go through is really thinking about some of those challenges that we face sometimes, and we can't just repeat the business as usual. We have to think about doing things differently. It is worth noting that letters are absolutely a form of accessible engagement, which particularly the older aged generation and population do still appreciate. However, if we have non-English speakers or non-English as a first language speakers, this can also present it as a challenge. So considering who letters go out to is going to be really important. You might already have a translation service, in which case this could be really nicely utilised for any of your retrofit projects. But also really think about that communication that you are utilising, making sure that it is in the appropriate level of kind of reading age for your residents, and making sure that it is something that people will be able to understand. So it might be a physical barrier to some people having something that isn't written in a language that they understand. So thinking about how we can signpost your translation services. Can you actually translate it for certain key communities that you're trying to really tap into? Think about it in terms of particular tenants. Could you utilize them to help in that process of translating what you're trying to say into an appropriate language to get that information across? When we think about it in terms of disability and disabled residents in particular, it's thinking about this covers a wide range of different elements. So this could be a physical disability. It could also be a mental health disability. So understanding how different combinations might be really appropriate for you in your process of getting that resident engagement. So think about it in terms of, are you going to have in-person events? Where will they be held? Are there kind of hearing loops that can help someone who maybe has a hearing impairment? Are there ramps to that to make it easily physically accessible? Do you have kind of particular times? So like museums have special sessions for autistic people to attend in a quiet session. Is that something that you could identify to do to enable people to come and still have that engagement, but have it in a kind of quieter setting? There are lots of other examples we could include here, but really think about your tenants, your residents, who is going to be impacted by this work, and how can you really think about designing that engagement piece to be specific to them. As I said at the beginning, we like to kind of include some different examples. Before we come on to them, I just want to kind of think about, let's make it fun. Let's make it enjoyable. Engaging with people doesn't have to be formal all the time. It can be different ways that we kind of express how we do this. So think about things around kind of creation of community gardens. You might already have community rangers. You might be engaged with third parties, local charities who are already doing that. Friends of parks are often quite a nice one to do. And thinking about other things. Some of these have costs associated with them, and I know that sometimes that is a hard resource to find. However, you can still be creative in terms of how to do this, and how to potentially ask organisations, external companies to support. I sit on a board of a housing provider, and they talked to a rug company, and the rug company actually donated some rugs. So over winter, people were able to come in and claim a free rug for their home to kind of help with that kind of feeling of kind of keeping warm in their home, kind of stopping kind of cold bits coming in. So there are different ways you can do this. You might already have some really great examples, and always willing to hear those examples. So things like fish and chip Fridays, quite traditional, might work in some areas, might not work in others. Ice cream, for example, again, if you can link with local companies who kind of do that, that might be a really nice opportunity. Inside activities as well, if you have extra care facilities or you have community hubs, things like board games, can be a really nice way of kind of having that engagement. And things like book clubs as well. How can we really engage with people, get talking? You could always find a kind of a book about kind of retrofit or kind of energy improvements, or a magazine article, and use that to kind of discuss things. So again, trying to make it engaging, making it fun is really important. We've got a couple of case studies now. You might also have different examples that you would like to share. And if you do have links to share in terms of projects you've worked on in your current organisation or in a previous one, we do love to hear about these. So please do share those in the chat. That would be really appreciated. So this is taken from Salix Homes, who are a Northern-based housing organisation. The details of this is taken from the National Housing Federation for a best practice example. So we'll just run through this in terms of some of the details. So back in 2019, following a review of their resident engagement structure, what they did at Salix was create a new customer committee. What this was trying to do was put customers at the heart of how they operated. The committee is made up of 12 committee members, and importantly, this is taken from a range of people from the local community, residents as well, to make sure that they are being held accountable in terms of consumer standards, but also that piece around expectations and outcomes for residents. Importantly, they are also paid the same amount as the board members, and they are given parity in terms of the governance structure. So again, it is about having equality as a thread here. The success of this project has been that creation of that charter. The charter is there to highlight the commitment to providing that best possible service for the residents. And if you want to have a look for it, that customer charter is called the Our Promise to You. What this does is it sets out a comprehensive set of new promises for customers, so they know exactly what to expect from us and from them as a social landlord. The promises which have come out of the customer committee are kind of focused around 7 key points. So it's about your voice. We will ask for, and I really like this bit, about valuing their views. Respect, so that is about being treated with respect, and that the relationship between the kind of landlord and tenant is around trust, honesty, and transparency. Communication is then aimed at being clear and accessible for the issues that matter to the committee, putting safety and quality at the heart of how they also build, improve, maintain, manage homes and neighbourhoods. So this is where retrofit comes in, because that improvement and maintenance really comes through for retrofit here. The services then around providing housing services that are effective, consistent and easy to access. So again, that piece on kind of how you can access it. Resolution is then about having a simple and accessible way of raising issues, complaints, putting things right. So acknowledging that sometimes things go wrong, things happen, but about making sure that that piece around putting things right. And this can be around disability, vulnerabilities, different challenges. And the last one is around accountability. So working in a partnership around the committee and residents to make sure that there is that oversight of what is taking place. Importantly, this was recognised. So in 2021, Salix were recognised as finalists in terms of outstanding tenant engagement, which is really nice because actually a lot of work went into this and a lot of kind of challenges. And we know we had kind of the COVID-19 pandemic during this time as well. So it's really important that there is that recognition. So if you want to find more information, there's lots on the TPAS websites around this one. If we look at another example, this one's taken from Hammersmith and Fulham, and this is around specific disabilities. So the other one was around accessibility in terms of resident engagement. This one is really specific around disability and how it is being addressed by Hammersmith and Fulham. So what they did is really thinking about, okay, we need to have a group that is really focused on this issue. So the Disabled People's Housing Strategy Implementation Group, which is a bit of a mouthful, DPHSIG, is around really putting in the focus for disabled residents and the people that support them. So that is family members and carers as well. It's about making sure that there is a strong voice. And the ethos is around nothing about disabled people without disabled people. And what the group does is take a social model of disability approach to its work and a commitment to inclusivity and accessibility. And what they did here is they really looked at that co-production and looking at that implementation of the housing strategy, particularly for the disabled people within that borough. So it's really thinking about making sure that those 4 kind of key objectives run through the plan, and so that people have a voice and they're also recognised within that. So we've had a lot of details here. Next couple of slides are just kind of pulling that together. Avani, I'm sure, will be putting in the polls into the chat box for you. She's also been putting in lots of our links, which is really fantastic. But let's put it all together. We know that as individuals on this call, we are all unique. That is absolutely true for any residents of any home across the country. So we need to respect that. Thinking about resident engagement as soon as possible is going to be really important here as well. Understanding different residents, different groups, different communities is going to be really important. And thinking about that understanding needs to be a comprehensive view of what is going on. Going back to the legal requirements, looking at those protected characteristics and making sure that when we are thinking about kind of accessibility to retrofit, thinking about retrofit and what is happening in the home, we need to be thinking about those characteristics as well. So bringing in all of that information and making sure that the plan is bespoke and unique, taking on board that unique situation that tenant might be in. Really thinking about tailoring that approach to maximise the accessibility of your resident engagement strategy. So thinking about language, thinking about font size. Does it need to be available in Braille, for example? Do you need to have it recorded? So how might that be something that people can access? So we know people are unique. We need to have that resident engagement strategy. It needs to be something that is live, that is going to work, and that is going to be something that is really unique for your project and for your people who are living in your homes. Just as a reminder, if you'd like to access much more of the support and the kind of level of details and that direct support for you, please do use the self-assessment form. Like Avani said at the beginning, you will get these slides emailed to you. So you'll be able to click in the self-assessment form, be able to fill that out, and that will then kind of unlock lots more information, lots more support. And also, again, when we're talking about being unique and appropriate to you, absolutely, it's about thinking what it is that you need to help your retrofit journey, particularly in the context of resident engagement, but also that wider piece on that retrofit journey. For those of you who are new, we always like to kind of try and finish with some further resources. I always like to kind of highlight to different agencies as well that we can kind of find information, because sometimes that piece of information needs that bit of data that we might not have, but another agency or another organisation might have. So we've got the link here to Shelter, who are a homeless charity. They have lots and lots of information about what triggers someone to become homeless, and disability, age, vulnerability really comes through as a really key thread in that. So we've put that link up there, and particularly to the England site, so that you can go and have a look and find some more information. Also, we've got a whole suite of different RISE masterclasses for you to sign up to. So engaging offline residents, so those who aren't digitally connected. That's a really nice masterclass. We have it on our YouTube channel as well. And we also run it quite regularly. So if you want to come to a live session again, that would be really fantastic to see you at. Likewise, resident engagement lessons learned. So previous waves of funding, looking back in terms of what we need to learn from that to do better with any potential future funding streams. And then thinking about, okay, well, how are we going to approach it? You might be a new person in role who's just suddenly been tasked with creating this resident engagement piece. So please do have a look at those. There are lots of other ones as well that will be really kind of useful to you. So go have a look at our website. Lots of different kind of resources for you to use. We're also starting to run lots of our day boot camps as well. So they're popping up around the country. So it'd be really lovely to see lots of you there. As always, if you have any particular queries, the email addresses are up there, highlighting the rise@turntown.co.uk one. That is a inbox that we have kind of someone looking after every day. So if they can't answer your question, they will signpost it to one of our specialists within the team. And it might be you have a particular query about data, around PAS 2035, around resident engagement, whatever it might be. Please feel free to drop us an email there, and absolutely have a look at the riseretrofit.org.uk website. And yeah, have a look at some of the other resources, some of the other events. And I will pull this to a close now. Thank you ever so much for joining us.